Warren Jeffs married girls as young as 12 to grown men. He did it for years inside towns in Utah, Arizona, and Texas, where the men he appointed as law enforcement and the judges he installed ensured no complaint escaped the community. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS, numbered roughly 10,000 under Jeffs' leadership, and he wielded absolute authority over who married whom, who received housing, who kept their children, and who was cast out. Pubescent girls were presented before him and assigned husbands by his hand. Boys who threatened older men's access to wives were expelled as teenagers, stripped of resources, education, and the only social network they had ever known, pushed into a world they had been taught to fear. State officials in Utah and Arizona had documented polygamy and underage marriage in these enclaves for decades. Their response repeatedly was to look away, to call it a cultural matter, to treat legally binding marriages of children as private, to allow records to accumulate without coordinated prosecution. That decision turned a string of abuses into a system. The FLDS traced its origins to the breakaway fundamentalists who refused to abandon plural marriage after the mainstream LDS Church renounced it in 1890. By mid-century, Colorado City, Arizona, and Hildale, Utah had become insular theocracies governed by a prophet whose word carried the force of law. When Warren Jeffs assumed the role of prophet in 2002, following his father's incapacitation, he moved quickly to centralize and accelerate a marriage regime that already tolerated plural unions and underage brides. He performed his own 14-year-old niece's wedding to a 19-year-old cousin. He officiated marriages between girls and their fathers. He reassigned wives and their children to other men when a husband fell from favor. Women were commanded to submit to sexual access on the prophet's say-so. Former members who fled in the early 2000s gave detailed testimony to journalists and investigators. Law enforcement recorded those accounts. Yet the state-level prosecutorial response remained fragmented and intermittent. Isolated inquiries, no unified strategy, no sustained effort to dismantle the institutional architecture that produced repeated sexual exploitation. The girls inside those towns did not simply face predators. They inhabited an entire social structure built to suppress escape and silence dissent. From childhood, they were educated to fear the outside world, to equate obedience to the prophet with spiritual survival, to accept marriage as destiny rather than choice. Some were married before they understood the meaning of consent. Alyssa Wall, at 14, told Jeffs she was not ready. He married her to a 19-year-old cousin, and her life thereafter was defined by repeated sexual violence until she escaped. Her testimony became pivotal in the Utah prosecution that followed. Official records show that Utah authorities had received complaints about underage marriages in Colorado City and Hildale as early as the 1980s. The Attorney General's office documented the practice. Yet the publicly offered rationales for inaction emphasized cultural complexity and limited cooperation, without reckoning that the FLDS had been deliberately structured to prevent cooperation. Law enforcement had, and still has, legal tools to compel evidence and protect victims. Tools that were not deployed at the scale required to interrupt what survivors called a systematic program of sexual abuse. The largest, most damning revelation in this story is procedural, not merely personal. Despite decades of documented abuse and official knowledge spanning 2 states, no state-level official in Utah or Arizona has been held accountable for the failure to act. Jeffs himself was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 2006 and arrested during a traffic stop in Nevada with a young girl in the vehicle. Convicted in Utah in 2007 as an accomplice to rape for performing an underage marriage, that conviction was later overturned on a jury instruction technicality. He was extradited to Texas after a 2008 raid revealed evidence and underage girls identified as his spiritual wives. In 2011, a Texas jury convicted Jeffs of sexual assault and aggravated sexual assault of a child. He received a life sentence plus fines and remains incarcerated. The FLDS communities in Colorado City and Hildale have diminished but persist, and former members report Jeffs continues to exert influence through intermediaries. What the record leaves open is the scale of the state's moral failing. How many legally documented marriages of children occurred between 1980 and 2006, while 2 state systems of law enforcement reviewed files and declined to act? Subscribe to Case Files TV, because deference to culture should never be a shield for crimes against children.